people are a lot more productive when they get dressed for work as opposed to sitting in their pajamas and just lounging around. Even me, even though I work from home, I'll get dressed, I'll even put on my shoes, even
Yeah.
though there's no reason to put my shoes on. But I know that if I feel like I'm dressed professionally, I'm dressed ready to work, I'm going to be more inclined to get work done. The same would apply to having a desk or having a space where you can work out of, a designated workspace, which is when I'm in this area, that means it's a work related. So even though in our mind we say, oh, I really should be doing it earlier because it's going to be better for me, it's going to be more effective and more efficient. Is it really more efficient? That's the first
Hmm.
question. Is it am I
Right.
gaining by doing it earlier? Or am I fooling myself into thinking that, you know
Hmm.
what, doing it earlier is going to be better for me um, because I can have it off my plate. But in reality, if I do my best work when it's last minute,
Hmm.
do I want to sacrifice doing my best work by pushing it
Hmm.
off?
And I don't know, just like start by doing like quick tasks. Like if you are going to achieve something, you can also reward yourself while you think you have to do something, and then it's like, hey, I got this done, so I'm gonna do a quick break, but blocking also the time that I'm supposed to be the things that I'm supposed to be doing, and being like disciplined and allocating those specific times for focus work or just break times. Have you ever had one of those days where the to-do list is endless, but you find yourself dumb scrolling through the TikToks instead?
Absolutely, Jess. And let's not even talk about those moments when I decide that cleaning the fridge is suddenly more urgent than tackling my deadlines.
You're not alone. And that's why today we'll be diving into a challenge all we all face, and it's called procrastination. It's sneaky, it's frustrating, and it's holding many of us back from being our best selves, especially for remote workers.
That's right. And lucky for us, we have an amazing guest today, Avi Friedman. He's a time management and productivity coach who has helped dozens of individuals, including those with ADD, ADHD, reclaim control of their time and maximize their productivity.
Avi has some fascinating insights about overcoming procrastination, managing your time when you lack of structure, and staying focused in a sea of distractions.
So let's get into it. Avi, welcome to the Hired Hub. How are you today?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And just before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. So my background is actually as a therapist, a marriage and family therapist. And more recently, I realized that if I could find an area that I personally struggled with and I'm able to help other people overcome that struggle, it's a lot more powerful and a lot more relatable in that. And I had major struggles when I was in college and first starting professional life, where I was naturally organized as a kid, but then all of a sudden you get to adult life and you're in charge of your schedule, you're in charge of your responsibilities.
Yeah.
No one's giving you that. Okay, do this from 9 to 9:30. Do this, and 10 to 10:15. You do that, and my calendar was a mess. My reminders were a mess, and I was just feeling like I was completely swamped. I had 45 snooze reminders on my phone that I would snooze daily because I just didn't know when to do it or how to do it. I missed payments and credit cards because I forgot to put on auto pay and I forgot that the day came up. So a lot of challenges I had, and decided, I'm not the only one. I know we all have these struggles to a certain degree. So I decided to pursue a passion of mine and be able to help other people with this.
That's amazing. And I think that it's something that we can all relate at one point or another. Like time management is it's so different for everyone. And it really resonates for me with a lot of topics because I have so many things going on in my mind and then trying to organize them. That's the tricky part. So really procrastination, it's not just about being lazy. It's often much deeper than that. Did you know that studies show procrastination is more about emotion management than time management, Jess?
That's true. It can stem from fear, overwhelm, or just even perfectionism. So, Abby, let's talk about the big question. Why do you think that we procrastinate, and how can we start breaking that cycle?
That's a great question because, again, procrastination comes for pretty much everyone procrastinates at some point or the other of pushing things off, whether it's because we, again, as you mentioned, we feel lazy, we feel like we're not in the mood to do it, or there's other things that are more important. And what I tell people just to start the conversation with procrastination is if there's no reason to do it now, then why wouldn't I procrastinate? Why wouldn't I push it off? Right? If this can be done now, this can be done later, then what's stopping me from saying, you know what, I'll do it at another point if it's a little bit uncomfortable, if it's a little bit annoying. And I think that's
Right.
really the starting point where understanding that it's a natural thing to want to push things off because as humans we don't like being uncomfortable. We don't like doing things that are out of our comfort zone. So really just validating that element where it makes sense why we push things off. That's really the starting point. When it comes to tackling procrastination, how do we actually do something that's on our plate that we need to be doing? The first step in the process is understanding what's holding us back from doing it. What is holding us back from taking
Okay.
this action? What is the first fear that we have? Is it a fear of success? Is it a fear of rejection? Is it a fear of the unknown? It's a very uncomfortable thing we don't want to do? So the first step in the process, it's a 3-step process I developed. The PRO. P stands for what is preventing me from doing this? What is holding me back
Okay.
from taking action?
So when you recognize that you're procrastinating, like the way to get quickly back on track is by first of all just realizing and realizing the situation and just asking yourself like, why am I avoiding this? Pretty much.
Exactly. And it reminds me of there's a client I had who I was working with. He's a software developer. He was building websites and doing branding. And he had this massive contract. It was a 6-figure contract that someone came over to him and said, okay, I know you normally build one website at a time, but here is a series of 13 websites for a chain of, I think it was a chain of nursing homes that he had. So can you put together a proposal for this? And the reason he reached out to me is because he had been pushing this off for about a week and not sending over a proposal for this project. And he was asking me, like, why am I pushing this off? It doesn't make any sense. This is going to take my business to another level if I'm able to get a contract this size. So we
Right.
worked through that process, and we realized that what he was struggling with was the fear of rejection, right? If you put out a proposal, you say, here's the work that I can do for you. There's a chance that they're going to say no. They're going to say and it's very uncomfortable to put yourself out there and get rejected. So that was one thing that he was struggling with. The second thing he was struggling with was the fact that he was used to doing one project at a time, and his team was equipped to do one project at a time. If now he has 13 projects all being done at the
Right.
same time, how is he going to be able to juggle that? If he does get the contract, if they say, okay, great, go ahead, let's start working on this. My team is not only able to do a small amount of work compared to the size of the contract. So there was that fear of success. What do I do? How am I going to be able to fulfill this contract? How am I going to be able to do all these 13 websites? So that was a fear of success that was impacting him as well. And then the third part was when he normally sent out a proposal to, okay, here's how we work together. He had a certain structure for how he put it together. But now there are a lot of different variations, a lot of different factors. Like, is every website can be the same? Is it 13 unique websites? So he was confused of what the next steps were, even in building out this proposal. So in this
Right.
one situation where he was pushing off this proposal, which again is understandable because there are so many different factors coming across, then by first having that recognition of what is holding me back from not doing it, we were able to tackle those. Again, we'll get into how we tackle them, but we were able to tackle each one individually because he was able to just have that awareness and to build that understanding of what is holding me back? Why am I not doing it?
So that's a great example. Like you mentioned there, like there's a root in fear, like that fear for failure, that discomfort, like it's a defense mechanism to avoid discomfort or being overwhelmed. He was also lacking clarity on how he was going to achieve that if he finally got that answer, that positive answer. And I think that, as you mentioned also, there's an emotional trigger that often comes from, not feeling confident enough, or not feeling like you have the specific skills to do something. So that
Right.
is that is completely human. I haven't thought of that before on why I procrastinate. I've always thought, and before we move on to the rest of the techniques to overcome procrastination, there's something there that I want to go back to quickly. You mentioned, of course, like avoiding discomfort, and I feel like when you procrastinate, you stop doing that thing that you need to do, but then you replace it with something that gives you more comfort. And I want to ask you about the role that dopamine plays when it comes to procrastination. Why do we prefer these things that don't reward us in the long run, but give us this instant gratification?
Right. And dopamine is an interesting element because even though we know that this project is going to, again, let's say he got this 6-figure project, that's going to give him a lot of dopamine in terms of getting the work done, servicing a client, building his business, getting that money. But it's a much farther down the line results. It's a much farther down the line dopamine hit because right now in the here and now, when he's putting together this proposal, nothing is exciting about putting the proposal together. When you get the
Right.
deal, when you get the money, that whether it's the upfront money, whether it's the money at the end of the project, that's really when you get the reward for doing this task or doing this project, as opposed to doing something else. Let's say putting out a post on LinkedIn where we feel that instant dopamine hit because I was able to put something out there, when that's a very short term result. It's a very short term reward because that's not going to, just doing one task here and there is not going to provide us with the larger reward that we're aiming for.
Right. Right. So let's go back into these techniques. You say, first of all, I need to just be aware, and I need to understand why I'm doing this. What else can someone do when they notice that they're procrastinating?
Okay, great. So that's really, so going back to the PRO, the making a pro, as I'd say, going from a pro
Yeah.
in procrastination to a pro in productive. So the R
Okay.
in that equation is reframe. So this is an example, is actually with a student I worked with who was telling me he was procrastinating doing his homework. His parents were upset that he was pushing it off to the last minute, wasn't always able to get it done. And I told him, okay, let's take a look. It's a 5-minute homework assignment, but it happened pretty frequently that he was pushing it off. So I said, okay, let's take a look through your day. You get home and it's time for your homework, and you say, okay, I know that I have this quick little assignment, but I'm not in the mood to do it now. I'll do it later. And again, very natural. Then I said, okay, what about when it's time for supper? Is it on your mind that you haven't done the homework assignment yet? You're like, yeah, it is on my mind. Then I go, okay, what about before you go out with your friends later in the evening? Yeah, it's still on my mind. I haven't done it yet. Okay, when you going to sleep, is it on your mind? Yeah, it's on my mind that I haven't done it yet. I'll get to it tomorrow. And he wakes up, it's still on his mind. When he gets to school, it's still on his mind. And finally, the 5 minutes before class, he gets it done, right? So when I asked him, when you're looking at this annoyance of a homework assignment, it's either that you have that it's that homework assignment is annoyance. Let's say it's a level 5 annoyance, and you assume that it's a level 5 annoyance right now, and it's also going to be a level 5 annoyance when you get to school and when it's the last second. So if it's, as I said in the beginning of the conversation, if it's uncomfortable to do it now and there's no additional discomfort by pushing it off, then yeah, I'll push it off. But in reality, if we think about it, how much is it on our mind the entire day? And as we keep on thinking about it, and again, depending on what the task is, the amount of frustration or guilt or shame that we're putting ourselves through by pushing it off is not the same level of discomfort as doing it when we first intend to do it. We're increasing that frustration. We're increasing that guilt, whether it's we're letting someone down by not doing it, whether we're
Right.
letting ourselves down by not doing it, whether it is having a financial impact. I know people push off taxes. Again, it's a very common thing. It's uncomfortable, but there's a financial impact that the longer you push it past the deadline, the more the interest accrues. So we're not doing ourselves a service by pushing it off. We're increasing the pain. And I think that's a very powerful reframe that we give ourselves is, yeah, if it's going to be exact the same amount of pain now and exact same amount of pain tomorrow, then yeah, sure, push it off. Why not? Why would I do it now? But it's not, because more often it is, we're increasing the amount of time that's nagging on our minds. We're constantly thinking about it. We're upset at ourselves that we haven't done it yet. We're kicking ourselves. Why can't I just get my act together and do it? And all those are adding up. So it's not the same amount of pain. So then there is a significant cost that it's having on us for actually pushing it off.
Right. So my question is, because you mentioned, and again, you exemplify it very well, of having to wait till the last moment to do things. For me, I don't know if that extra rush of adrenaline of knowing that I
Yeah,
have to do it then, and that's the last very moment that I can do it, that's what really ultimately leads me to do it. But
happens.
absolutely, I get more annoyed every time that I have to think that I need to do it. And then
Right.
those last 5 minutes or that last hour before I deliver, that's when it gets harder. It gets more annoying, but at the same time, that's what leads me to do it. So
So
where
in
does
those,
that also come from? Like
so in that
knowing
situation,
that you're
and
able to do it,
yeah.
yeah, but waiting till the last moment to do it.
So what I would question is it really more effective for me to do it earlier, or do I even do it better because it's the last second? If someone specifically has a reason to push it off, right? Let's say, for example, if I were to ask you, have you done your 2026 taxes yet? No, you haven't done it because it's not the right time for it, right? You can't do it now. There's no way to predict how much money you're going to make in the next year. So it wouldn't make sense at all. So when the time comes for it, that's when I'll address it. That's when I'll deal with it. So for some people where they know that I am great under pressure, I'm very good at being under the gun, and it's working for me, then what's the cost of pushing it off? It really would be more beneficial for them in a way to push things off.
Right.
And I think that the fact that we always get it done right before delivering something, it's the reason why we keep procrastinating, because it has been working for us, like delivering the task or something that we have to get done right before 5 minutes for the deadline, like if we get used to doing things before and organizing ourselves to get this job done, it's going to be better because, as you said, it's not going to be in our mind. But the fact that we keep doing it and it's right, like it's done well, and we get to do it at the end at the last minute, it's like that's the reason why why we keep doing it.
Right, 100%. Because in our mind, the reason we keep pushing it off is because it actually ends up becoming, because I have a set amount of time, let's say the last 5 minutes or the last hour before it's due, and I can really knock it out in that 5 minutes or that hour, then it
Right.
makes sense why I'm going to get a very solid crunch of time to do it. So even though in our mind we say, oh, I really should be doing it earlier because it's going to be better for me, it's going to be more effective and more efficient, is it really more efficient? That's the first
Mm-hmm.
question. Is it am I
Right.
gaining by doing it earlier? Or am I fooling myself into thinking that, you know
Mm-hmm.
what, doing it earlier is going to be better for me um, because I can have it off my plate. But in reality, if I do my best work when it's last minute,
Mm-hmm.
do I want to sacrifice doing my best work by pushing it
Mm-hmm.
off?
There's a technique that works a lot, and I've tried implementing it, and it's the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if you've heard of it, like structure systems that create accountability in short, like times.
Mhm.
So that could help if someone is struggling right now with procrastination. Try to have like blocks of time and counting that so that your mind or you it's a different kind of way of doing things that might help you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, when it's more short stints, and we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's part of the O. It's more short stints, and it's not an hour of work. If it's okay, just 25 minutes or just 10 minutes, whatever that amount of time is, it makes it a lot more approachable and a lot more bite sized to be able to actually get it done for
Right.
sure.
Right. You mentioned something about, if I'm able to do my best work at the very end, um, doing that because I think that we condition ourselves to think that. But then again, something that I try to question myself is, am I really doing my best work by leaving this to the last moment? So it's something that I try to, when I try to push myself, which is when I try to do things better, one thing that I think about and that helps me avoid procrastination is thinking, I can do it better now that I have more time to do it than leaving it to the last moment. And that's something that really happens for me and that always leads me. It's a little bit counterproductive because when I have more time to sit with it, I become even more perfectionist about it. Like I feel like I'm more, I don't know if obsessed about the details that of what I'm working on. And then that's also the same reason why I always leave something till the end. Because if I leave it till the last moment, I can't really overthink it
Right.
until I dislike it. I have to deliver it. There's no
Absolutely.
other way around it.
Right, because we get into these types of projects or tasks where there's no official endpoint, right? Let's say I draft, whether it's an email, whether it's a social media post, whether it's a podcast script that you're writing out. There's always going to be edits and always going to be changes,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell people this all the time when someone has a project on the list to improve your website, to improve my website. There's no endpoints to improving a website. It's an ongoing process. There's always going to
Yeah.
be iterations, always going to be plugins you want to add. There's always going to be new graphics that you can adjust or to fix the speed. If there's no concrete vision of what does an endpoint look like, then again, as you're sharing with your example, there's always going to be more to edit it, and I don't want to spend 3 weeks editing it. I'd rather spend an hour, get it done, not need to think about having more time to do those edits after the fact. Then that is one of the reasons why it may be better, even from the onset, to plan it out to do it the last second. Again, the last second doesn't have to be 5 minutes before, but it could be the day before,
Right.
as opposed to planning it out 3 weeks in advance. Because if we know ourselves that we're not going to be happy with just letting it sit there, okay, we planned it out, we finished it, now let me let it sit for the next 2 weeks until it actually launches or until it actually goes out, then I would question if that really is the best time to do it in advance, or is it going to have an impact on the rest of our work over the next 2 weeks because we're always thinking about, oh wait,
Right.
there's always more edits I can do. There's always more changes I can make.
Absolutely. I think in essence, we're just saying that it's effectively not just laziness. Like there's the whole overthinking part of, and what you say, like, not because I'm not doing it doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about it. I know that I have to do it. And then I spend all this time just thinking that I have to do it and even the best way to do it when I get to it. So for me, even though I can see sometimes, I would say procrastination is still my enemy. I don't want to like give it this negative connotation, but it's definitely something that can be risky for me particularly. And then I find a lot of help and structure in building a routine that helps me. But really talking about structure, I think that when it comes to working remotely, I think we see that there is no natural structure. It's something that's still very new to us. So because you're juggling work tasks, personal life, and then all the entertainments and all these temptations that you have at home. You just have your sofa and your bed and your TV, and you want to just do those things that give you that instant gratification. So, without a clear plan, I think that it's very easy to be overwhelmed. So, Abby, my question to you is, how can we create a structure that feels supportive rather than stifling when it comes to remote work? Like, what strategies can help remote workers structure their day to avoid feeling overwhelmed at home?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of different. I mean, that in and of itself is a talk hours and hours about the different elements and different challenges. So I would say that to put this into two different categories, I would say there's environmental structure, like where I am physically,
Okay.
and also workload structure. So in terms of environment, and this, there's a lot of studies out there that people are a lot more productive when they get dressed for work as opposed to sitting in their pajamas and just lounging around. Even me, even though I work from home, I'll get dressed. I'll put on my shoes, even
Yeah.
though there's no reason to put my shoes on. But I know that if I feel like I'm dressed professionally, I'm dressed ready to work, I'm going to be more inclined to get work done. The same would apply to having a desk or having a space where you can work out of, a designated workspace, which is when I'm in this area, that means it's a work related task or project I'm doing. If I'm by my kitchen table and the same table that I'm eating at with the family or playing games with the family, then to have that differentiation of now is work time versus family time, it's very hard to
Right.
draw that distinction. So that there's a lot of environmental areas, factors that you can improve. The most important mindset is, can I, how do I discern, how do I differentiate between a work environment and a home environment? How do I know when I'm at work, and how do I know when I'm home? Like
Right.
even for myself, if I know that if for whatever reason I can't work at the office or I can't work at my desk and I need to work out of my dining room table, I'll try to sit at a different seat at the table, even though like I have my normal seat that I sit at when the family's together. I'll sit at the other end of the table just to give me that feeling of, hey, something's off here, something's different, it's a different viewpoint. And that's because I don't want to get accustomed to, okay, when I'm at the table, I'm just going to chill, I'm just going to relax when I want to get work done.
Right.
I think also what you're talking about, it depends on having like routines. So what you were saying, it's like, for instance, if you have probably a morning routine, establish consistent morning habits that will provide you that stability.
Mm-hmm.
Like doing physical movement, I'm starting to go to the gym, so that's something that's helping me get my mind off work. That's something really important to help me even focus on what I'm doing right now. And journaling has also been a small part of my life that has been improving how I feel, what I think, and just like trying to focus and exercising my mind into that moment, like, and I don't know, just like start by doing like quick tasks. Like if you are going to achieve something, you can also reward yourself. Well, you think you have to do something, and then it's like, hey, I got this done, so I'm gonna do a quick break, but blocking also the time that I'm supposed to be the things that I'm supposed to be doing, and being like disciplined and allocating those specific times for focus work or just break times. So
Right.
yeah, I think those are really good techniques that will help you stop procrastinating, or just probably have give it a management, because sometimes it's really hard to just stop being, if you have been procrastinating your whole life, it's really hard for you to stop doing it from one moment to another.
Yeah,
So
100%. Yeah, those are all techniques that are helping us reduce the overwhelm. The amount of, okay, it's overwhelming. There's so much on my plate. There's so much to do, and I'm waking up with that sense of, oh my gosh, there's a full day of work ahead of me. And again, taking the time to ground yourself and say, okay, I'm going to journal. I'm going to get a workout in. I'm going to do some sort of routine before I get to ease myself into a full day of work. I think it's an excellent idea. I personally, so I start my morning after my kids go to school. So I first I take a walk around the block with my wife, and we just again just start the day off, talk about what each other's days look like. Then I do an exercise routine, shower, get ready for work, and then I start my day. And that's how I finish the personal life elements, and then I get into my office, and then sit by my desk for that. In terms of and just getting back to the procrastination, what you mentioned is a very important piece of procrastination, which is the O of the formula, the PRO. Again, P is what's preventing me, R is reframing, is it even helping me? And O is what's one thing that I can do to make this task easier or to push through this task. And again, setting timers is a huge asset of things that we can do, because I don't have, oftentimes we have like a project that we're pushing off because it is an enormous project. There's so many steps. It's going to take hours and hours. And we're thinking, when do I have time for a 20-hour project? Where in my calendar do I have 20 hours available? Like, most people don't have that kind of freedom of amounts of time available. Rather, breaking it into small chunks is a tremendous value in, okay, I don't have time for 20 hours. Obviously, that's not going to happen today or this week. But what is a small chunk that I can break this down into from a time perspective of, okay, I don't have time to do the entire project, but what can I spend 10 minutes doing? Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes the hardest part of working on a task that we're pushing off is just the getting started. That initial force of, I just don't want to even start the process. If I can go into it saying, okay, I'm just going to set a timer of a 10-minute timer. Okay, here for the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to start this project. I'm going to start this task. And after 10 minutes, I can assess and say, you know what, do I want to continue this or do I want to do something else? And more often than not, we'll just continue doing that process, because the hardest part is that those first few minutes of just getting started. But if we tell ourselves, okay, what's one thing that I'm going to do? And that's, okay, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes doing this. Is that so hard? Is that really such a problem? No, because it's only 10 minutes. I'm not thinking about the 20 hours it's going to take. I'm just focused on, what can I do in the next 10 minutes? What can I do? I need to just brainstorm what all the steps are. Do I need to open the document? Do I need to just put into ChatGPT what the draft is going to be to get ideas? Whatever those next steps are, that's really what we're going to spend the 10 minutes doing. And that makes it a huge difference in starting the process.
I like what you said, like having like little structures to like question yourself. What do I need to get this done in order for me to fulfill this? So I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give people that are listening to us right now, or someone that has been constantly procrastinating and feels like they're struggling to keep up?
Okay, great question. So I'm gonna give a few different strategies that could be used, a few different tools. The way I view it is that you have a toolbox. Okay, here are a lot of different tools that you can use, and every situation is different. Sometimes 10 minutes is not going to help me because I'm just nervous about doing the task to begin with. Like, that's really the fear. So here are just a few different strategies that you can use. The first one is setting that 10 minutes and just, okay, I'm just going to take 10 minutes and do that task and just leave it at 10 minutes. The next way, another strategy that can be used is to break it down into, what is the next action I need to do for this task? Because again, we have a lot of projects in our work or personal life that we don't know how to get started. We don't know what to do. And just as an example that I've used myself is someone that's trying to buy a new desk for their house, right? Okay, I know I need to have a workspace. I'm going to buy a desk, so I'm going to go scroll on the internet, Amazon or wherever I'm getting my equipment from, and I'm just going to scroll in and get a desk. And that project can sit on our project list for a while, because there's a lot of questions that we have of, what kind of desk do I need? What's good for me? What size is important? and we don't even have that ability to make that purchase. We wouldn't be able to go and buy a desk, because if we don't know if it's going to fit in our room, then you can't go and buy a desk. So the next step before buying a desk would be to measure the space of what size desk would make sense for me, right? And we might not even be able to measure the space because we might not have a tape measure, and it could be, or we don't know where the tape measure is. So that first step of buying a desk for our home office, the next action for that project would be borrow a tape measure or buy a tape measure. And it's a very bite-sized step, instead of just spending time scrolling through websites of thinking that our next step is to buy a desk. Well, that's not really the next action. And once we get that clarity, we're able to say with all of our projects, right? I had a friend who was working on cleaning out his garage, right? That was one thing that was on his project list for his home life. And I said, like, okay, what's holding you back from doing it? What are the next steps that are involved? And he said, just finding a few minutes when I'm home and my wife is there, and we can just talk about what things we're keeping and what things we're throwing out. Because in his mind, okay, I have to take care of this big project of clearing out a garage, but I'm not even up to clearing out the garage yet, because I don't even know what needs to be cleared, what doesn't. So I'm just going to push it off. So getting clear on what is that next action that I can do to move forward on that project or on that task. Sometimes it's a conversation. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's an email. Sometimes it's an errand, go to the store. But really just trying to clarify what that next action is oftentimes the missing piece.
Right. So part of breaking down what we need to do is just making that initial list of steps. That really works for me. Like just visualizing, like when you say like, what's that one thing that I can do? The first thing that I'm going to do about something that I've been procrastinating, let me just think how I can approach it, how I can tackle it. And then that would be my first step. And then make that list and start working on even the easier bits of it, because there's some things that are linear, some things that I need to do first to do other things, but then there are other things that overlap or that I can do in an asynchronous way. So that always helps me. If I don't want to tackle that big thing right away, that big task, let me just see what other things I can start doing, and that will also help me feel productive. Something that also helps me is like, obviously, and I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago about perfection, changing that mindset. Because again, sometimes what overwhelms me is thinking that I'm not going to be able to do it perfectly, but then I just need to start it and then I'll figure it out. So that also helps me.
And to that first point of writing things, of brainstorming, I've had multiple people that were struggling with having a phone call with someone, or they want to schedule a meeting with an employee or with an employer. And even just, and I say, okay, what's holding you back from doing this task? Oh, it's very uncomfortable. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't know what to say. And I said, okay, the next action you can do is just jot down some notes for yourself of what you want to talk about. Even again, just writing it down in a way which is going to give you clarity on, or if you're doing sales and you're trying to reach out for to a potential customer, writing out, okay, what do I want to highlight? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to say in this phone call or in this email? Just again, that's really could also break it down into smaller pieces. And another example, there's someone who was pushing off a phone call that's very uncomfortable. And I said, okay, what's the next action you can do? And he said, I can text them to find out when's a good time for a phone call.
Right.
And even again, obviously that depends on the situation, but even that, breaking it down into a smaller, bite-sized, more manageable step was huge for him to be able to actually have that conversation in that regard. And then in terms of just a couple other strategies also, one strategy that I use a lot is, it's called Eat the Frog by Brian Tracy. And the idea is, let's say if I asked both of you, okay, today your number one job is to eat a live frog today. And Obviously, no one wants to do that. That would be super gross and uncomfortable, whatever it is. And there's really two ways you can go about your day. You can either spend the entire day, okay, I'm going to push this off to the end of the day, but the entire day I'm going to be thinking about, ugh, I can't believe I have to do this. Ew, this is gross. Ugh, I don't want to do it. Ugh, ugh, ugh. And the entire day is spent just dreading that task or dreading that frog. Or I can say, you know what, let me just get this over with. And then I know that the rest of the day is going to be so much easier because nothing's going to compare to doing that uncomfortable eating the frog. So in a similar way, what is that frog for us? What is that task or project that is going to just bog us down until it's done? And if I can finish that and say, you know what, instead of just pushing off to the end of the day or to the end of the week or month, and it's just very uncomfortable and I'm always going to be thinking about it, it's always on my head, let me think about the opposite way, which would be, okay, let me just get it done with. And then I don't need to think about it. It's off my mind completely, and I don't need to worry about that. So if we're in a situation where something is uncomfortable and we don't want to do it, and we say, you know what, this is just a frog I'm going to eat, and then just be done with it, it's going to make things just feel much better the rest of the time because we're not sitting there and thoughts around our head about, oh, we still haven't done it yet, or we still need to do it.
Thank you so much, Avi. I think this has been such an insightful conversation, and everything that you have brought to the table has been really important. And I know a lot of people will take a lot of information out of this. And your tips are not just practical, but really, really, really empowering. So thank you again.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's a topic that has so much ground to cover, and like we said at the beginning, it's not so simple as it seems. There's just so many things that we could just keep talking about. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our episode. We've really learned about beating procrastination and managing our time, and how it isn't just about doing more, it's about doing what matters most. So thank you for sharing that with us, Avi, today.
Okay, my absolute pleasure. And again, I could talk about this for hours, but there's so much that we can do. The biggest thing is understanding why we're pushing it off, realizing it's not helping us, and just what's one small thing that I can do to move ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And well, for our listeners, if procrastination has been holding you back, take this advice to heart. Small steps today can lead into massive progress tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into the Hired Hub. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who might need it. Until next time, I'm Gabby.
And I'm Jess. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn or social media and turn on those notifications so that you don't miss any of our new episodes. We post each week to help you build a better work life.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.